Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for a moment that you're standing in a river. The water moves around you, softly, insistently, never the same twice. You try to cup it in your hands to hold it still, but the more tightly you grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. This, you see, is what we've tried to do with love, with relationships, with marriage. We've turned something as alive as a river into a contract, a box, a cage, and when the bird no longer sings, we blame the bird. You see, we've inherited a view of morality that draws straight lines through the spirals of life. It tells us that breaking a vow is a crime against the divine. But what if the divine is change itself? What if the deepest sin is not walking away, but refusing to? If you've ever wondered whether tradition serves truth or suffocates it, then you may find this talk disturbing, liberating, possibly both. But I must warn you, if you listen carefully, if you truly let these questions into the quiet places of your heart, you might never see relationships or yourself the same way again. The illusion of permanence is one of the great myths we've wrapped around the idea of marriage. In a world where every cloud shifts, every tree grows and withers, and every breath is different from the last, we have somehow come to believe that love, this most delicate, living thing, should remain unchanged. We sign papers, speak vows, and wear rings as if they are talismans to freeze time. But the truth is, love is not a monument, it is a movement. And when we treat it otherwise, we do not honor it, we trap it. Marriage, in its essence, is not wrong. It's a ritual, a celebration, a deep intention to grow together. But when we confuse the form for the function, we mistake the map for the territory. We forget that the connection between two people is not held together by tradition, law, or even promise. It is held together by presence, attention, and truth. So when a marriage reaches its end, it is not necessarily a failure. It may simply be a natural transformation. The relationship served its purpose. It taught, it revealed, it awakened. And like all things in nature, it may die to make space for something else. A divorce, then, is not always a tragedy. It can be an honest bow to the truth that what once was is no longer. The real tragedy is staying in something lifeless out of fear, guilt, or the mistaken belief that permanence equals virtue. If we listen deeply to the rhythm of life, we see that all things flow, and to resist that flow, to insist that love remain fixed, is to try and hold water in a clenched fist. The illusion of permanence blinds us not only to the nature of relationships, but to the very nature of life itself. Sin is a word that trembles with weight, not because of what it is, but because of what we've made of it. For centuries it has been wielded like a blade, sharp, moral, absolute. But what is sin, truly? Is it a violation of some cosmic law? Or is it a man-made boundary drawn in the sand, shifting with culture, history, and fear? When we speak of divorce and remarriage as sin, we must ask, whose definition are we using? Is it the voice of the divine, whispering through the trees and stars? Or is it the voice of men, long gone, whose rules once served a different time? Religion has often turned sin into a tool of conformity. Sin is a word that trembles with weight, not because of what it is, but because of what we've made of it. For centuries it has been wielded like a blade, sharp, moral, absolute. But what is sin, truly? Is it a violation of some cosmic law? Or is it a man-made boundary drawn in the sand, shifting with culture, history, and fear? When we speak of divorce and remarriage as sin, we must ask, whose definition are we using? Is it the voice of the divine, whispering through the trees and stars? Or is it the voice of men, long gone, whose rules once served a different time? Religion has often turned sin into a tool of conformity, not necessarily out of malice, but out of a desire to make sense of chaos. In the past, divorce threatened social order, economic stability, even survival, so it was forbidden. But today, that same restriction can become a prison. When morality is based solely on obedience rather than understanding, it loses its soul. True sin, if such a thing exists, is not about breaking rules. It is about breaking connection to self, to others, to life. If staying in a loveless marriage suffocates your spirit, is that holiness? And if choosing to end it to seek truth and rebirth brings you closer to wholeness, is that sin? The sacred is not always found in the continuity of tradition, but often in the courage to listen to what is real here, now. To confuse social judgment with spiritual truth is to mistake the echo for the voice. The real question is not whether divorce or remarriage is a sin, but whether our understanding of sin is still alive or just a relic we carry because we're too afraid to let go. Love, guilt, and freedom form a triangle in which many souls become trapped. Love at its purest is a force without obligation. It arises, dances, and fades like sunlight through trees. But the moment we attach conditions, rules, permanence, fear, it begins to stiffen. It turns into something else: duty, expectation, a performance. And from this tension, guilt is born, not because we have done something inherently wrong, but because we have disappointed an idea of how things should be. Guilt in this context is not a sign of wrongdoing, but of internal conflict between authentic feeling and inherited belief. Society tells us we must endure, must stay, must suffer for the sake of appearances or spiritual worthiness. But love does not thrive in captivity. It withers when placed beneath the weight of should. Freedom, then, is not the absence of commitment, but the presence of truth. It is the willingness to say, this is no longer alive, and I will not pretend it is. It is not selfishness to leave what no longer nurtures the soul. It is responsibility. And yet, when someone chooses to end a marriage or dares to love again after divorce, they are often met not with compassion, but condemnation. The guilt they feel does not come from the heart, but from the echoes of a culture that worships permanence over authenticity. But freedom is not the enemy of love, it is its foundation. Love cannot be forced into obedience. It must breathe. It must be free to change, to evolve, to end and begin again. And if we are to love truly, we must also have the courage to accept when the time for letting go has come. Guilt may visit, but it need not stay, because love, when real, liberates. It does not imprison. We often view relationships as destinations, as if once entered they should remain fixed, stable, eternal. But relationships, like everything in nature, are part of a cycle. They are born, they bloom, they transform, and sometimes they dissolve. This is not failure, it is rhythm. The same way the seasons shift, the tides move, and the moon waxes and wanes, human connections also go through their own unfolding. To demand constancy from something so alive is to deny its very nature. Growth is often quiet, invisible, even uncomfortable. The fear of starting over is rarely about the logistics of change. It is about the vulnerability that comes with uncertainty. To end a marriage and begin again is not just to leave behind a person, a home, a history. It is to step into a space where nothing is promised. It is to face the silence of a blank page and a trembling hand that dares to write again. We are creatures of habit, of narrative. We tell ourselves stories of forever, of one true love, of what a successful life should look like. And when that story begins to unravel, we don't just grieve the relationship, we grieve the version of ourselves who believed in it. We fear being seen as broken, as lost, as wrong. So many stay in dying unions, not because they are content, but because the image is easier to maintain than the unknown. But the unknown is not your enemy. It is the birthplace of all beauty. Every new beginning starts with a fall into mystery, into vulnerability, into the terrifying honesty of not knowing what comes next. And yet within that space there is also incredible freedom. To start over is to reclaim your authorship. To say, I am not a prisoner of my past choices. I am still becoming. The idea that remarriage is a sin stems less from divine wisdom and more from our discomfort with change. It reflects our collective unease with those who walk away, who begin anew, who refuse to suffer quietly for the sake of appearance. But healing is not linear. Love is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of courage, because starting over isn't. Spiritual integrity and social approval rarely walk hand in hand. One asks for truth, the other demands performance. And when it comes to divorce and remarriage, this conflict becomes painfully clear. Society has crafted an image of virtue, lifelong marriage, unwavering loyalty, suffering in silence if necessary. It applauds endurance, even in misery, because it values appearances over authenticity. But the soul plays by different rules. The soul seeks alignment, not approval. It is not interested in being polite if that means being false. To stay in a relationship that has become hollow out of fear of judgment or the need to appear faithful is not an act of holiness. It is an act of forgetting who you are, forgetting what love truly is. There is nothing spiritual about pretending. True spirituality is not found in obedience to outdated structures. It is found in the willingness to live in accordance with what is alive within you. Sometimes that means staying. And sometimes it means walking away. Remarrying after divorce is often labeled as moral failure. But who decided that starting again was sinful? Who benefits from that belief? If a relationship ends and another begins in truth, in presence, in mutual awakening, how can that be less sacred than enduring a union void of real connection? The question we must ask ourselves is not what will they think, but what is true for me now? The path of spiritual integrity is not always praised, as it is not always understood, but it is real. And in the end, it is far more honest to be judged for telling the truth than to be celebrated for. Let others cling to the shell. Your task is to follow the pulse of the living truth, even if it leads you through endings and into beginnings. So, is divorce and remarriage a sin? Only if you believe that truth is less important than tradition. Only if you believe that staying in something lifeless is more noble than walking towards something real. The deeper question is not about sin, but about sincerity, about whether we are willing to live in alignment with what is alive instead of what is expected. Love was never meant to be a sentence. It was meant to be a song. And songs, like seasons, rise and fall, end and begin again. Divorce is not a failure. Remarriage is not betrayal. They are simply chapters in the greater unfolding of who you are becoming. To love once is brave. To love again after heartbreak is even braver, because it means you believe in the possibility of growth, of grace, of beginning again, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence for what is real. Let others hold on to the fear, the shame, the rigid lines of what should be. You, however, are free to walk the path of what is. And there, in the quiet center of your own truth, there is no sin, only the sacred act of becoming.